Thank you, Pooja. Good afternoon. I hope all of you are keeping well. I am Avnish Sabharwal, leading the innovation agenda at Accenture India, and the moderator for today's panel on innovation strategies for growth. Before we start, I'd like to provide a brief context on the topic. So as we know, innovation has become a necessity for all enterprises that want to survive in a world characterized by competition, technological change, and recurring crisis. While many of the biggest corporations have outlined plans to stay ahead of disruption, it is important that small and medium-sized enterprises that represent around 90% of all firms globally and make up roughly 70% of employment, and by some estimates contribute to 70% of global GDP, also adopt an innovation mindset so that they can survive and thrive in a VUCA world. MSMEs are, by the way, already leading the innovation agenda for countries like Switzerland, which is ranked #1 in the Global Innovation Index. Now, SMEs and small and medium enterprises could also be called as the lifeblood of Indian economy, contributing about 30% of India's GDP, employing more than 11 crore people, generating 45% of industrial production, and constituting over 40% of all exports. SMEs across the country are finding innovative ways to pivot their business and embrace technology to thrive in a post-pandemic world. Digitization has become a necessity and a question of survival. The adoption of technology by small and medium enterprises throws up a big business opportunity worth 85 billion by 2024 for companies that build digital solutions. Several startups like Khatabook, Udan, Freshworks, and large corporations like Tally, Intuit are capitalizing on this unique opportunity already. MSMEs like Fluid Robotics, Clean India Ventures, Bellatrix Aerospace, and Agraya Technologies are already doing some very innovative work, leveraging the power of technology. For SMEs, riding out the pandemic is critical, but it's not enough. They need to envision a next normal for doing business. They need a long-term plan for restart and recovery focused on exceeding and not just returning to their pre-crisis performance. In other words, they need to innovate and adopt digital technologies to improve business performance. With this short context setting, let's start the discussion. And I am excited to have Vered and Ismail as part of this panel discussion. So I like to start off with both of them and asking a common question. The pandemic has brought in several changes in a way that we work and live. Some of these changes are expected to be permanent now. So how can SMEs who have been impacted by these changes prepare for a never normal world? Does the answer lie in technology or more on innovative business models or in an ability to rapidly pivot or a combination of all these? So Vered, would you like to start, please?
Yes, thank you. So shalom and namaste to everyone. And I would like to give the Israeli perspective in this case and to say that I think there is many reasons or many aspects, but I think flexibility in this case, it's very important. And one of the Israeli strengths, it's flexibility. To many reasons, but one of them, I think it's a combination between entrepreneur and innovation. And I think that a good example that you mentioned about Switzerland, that it's good, it's ranking first in innovation. So I think what is unique in Israel, it's a combination between entrepreneur and innovation. And I think that should be together in order to help for SME to grow and to deal with the pandemic and with changes that we can see all around in different, many aspects, pandemic, trend, fashion, technology, and more. So I can give just for example that where India, it's more advanced than Israel in innovation, it's a non-bank payment. And I think that it's a good example. I think in entrepreneurship, not yet. We give a nice fight to India, but it's one. And the second, it's technology. And I think that the COVID-19, as you mentioned, taught us to work remotely, to receive other services, health remotely. And I think it's an excellent opportunity for digital technology, as you mentioned, but I can say digital and technology. It's not only digital technology, it should come together, and then also together with innovation and entrepreneur. I think that can be a good opportunity for SME to grow.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Vered. Ismail, over to you. Do you have some opening comments on this question?
Yeah, and thanks for having me on this. Great to be here. Actually, you know, I did a book with Vivek Wadhwa, who some of you will know from Carnegie Mellon and Harvard. And we actually looked at what makes up the DNA of an organization that positions it well for change and innovation. And there's really 5 things we came up with. And actually, although technology is a foundation, it isn't really the key characteristic that we found in our research. So the 5 things we talked about, the first point was that companies who do this just have a DNA and a metabolism of operating faster. And there's a lot of research in this space, and McKinsey have done a lot, which actually suggests that companies who are going to innovate, they just allocate talent and capital really quickly. In fact, 4 times more quickly than their nimble peers. So they operate quickly. The second thing is the decisions that they're making are not just faster, but they're bolder. You know, they're braver. They're outside of the box. And the decision number 3 comes from really powerful data and insight. So it's not instinctive, it's really based on, of course, there's so much data available now that we've never had really. So great data, making decisions which are really bold. And then the 4th thing we found is that organizations who want to innovate understand that it is something that they must do all the time. They must be ready to innovate. So in addition to running their profitable businesses, they are doing something on the side, something as part of the business to try different things out. And the 5th thing is it is all based on genuine customer centricity. So trying to understand what the customer is going through, what the business values are, what will make a difference to the client, will drive what you try based on data really quickly. And that's sort of some of the traits that we found driving innovation.
Thanks very much, Ismail. And I think if I'm not wrong, a lot of these traits would probably be as applicable to MSME as well as to a big enterprise, right? Customer centricity, for example, adoption of technology, allocation of funds, taking bolder decisions. I think all of them are highly relevant, to the MSME space as well. So thank you very much for those insights. So Vered, I'll come back to you. The cooperation between industry, academia, and government bodies is needed to improve the innovation capacity and sustainability of MSMEs, right? This has been proven world over. And, Israel does this very, very well. So can you please throw some light on this really unique innovation model where all the different parts of the ecosystem come together successfully?
Thank you. So first of all, in Israel, it's only 9% of the workforce out of the SME are startups. Startups that are dealing in innovation. But the GDP, it's 12%, and the 52% of Israel annual exports. So there are very significant parts of the Israeli economy, the startups and innovation and entrepreneurship. And the private sector is very strong and independent in Israel. Multinationals that are active in Israel from the private sector are a very significant role, more than the government. 80% of the investment come from foreign corporates that are active in Israel. And since Israel is a very small country with about 9 million people, I think like Bangalore, the circle
But
of
with the highest
connection.
per capita innovation, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, but yeah, you're absolutely right. We're ranking first in the both, also in per capita and also in the absolute number. So the circle of connection is very wide. So it's in school, in the army, that it's mandatory in Israel to serve for 3 years, and also the academy. So it's produced like a great family. So in Hebrew we call it achi. I think in Hindi it's like baya. So the feeling in Israel, it's like a big family. So I can easily reach everyone that I want to talk to as a family member, more than hierarchy. So anyone that I would like to talk, even CEO, I can talk as a friend. So it's much softer hierarchy in Israel. So this allowed for a quick decision that I think also Samal talk about it. And the distance is very short also, but by to move from one place to another. So it's very easy to make like a pilot or a meeting. So it's make also a very short time for decision and very high accessibility for the startups. In the academic perspective, so we have in Israel only 16 TTO, Tech Transfer Officer, and their responsibility to take all the research from the academy that it's ready to the industry. But most of the startup burn out of science, so out of the academy, basically, and therefore technology is very powerful in Israel. Most of entrepreneurship came from there. So of course, multinational also played a significant role. And since there is no market in Israel, as I mentioned, it's a very tiny country, so the government are focused more in the exporting innovation rather than local traditional manufacturers. So the government identified area, just for example, the government identified area there it's necessary to promote innovation and to help for grow. And for example, incubator in Israel. So it's for startups at the Asian level. The government is holding a tender, and to which private company or corporates that they build a form of a consortium, and the startup that they enter the incubator will receive 85% from the government for 2 or 3 years, but burden of proving growth dependent on the startups and the incubator itself. So it's a private sector. It's also the way for the government to ensure that the IP will remain in Israel.
No, I think your points, Vered, where you talk about reaching out very quickly. I know that it is said that you can reach anybody in Israel in 2 calls, right? That is that is what the common saying is. I totally agree with you. Yeah, but I'll still maybe go a little deeper on this. That you have these different stakeholders. You have the military, you have the government, you have private sector, you have startups, you have academia. So all of them obviously have slightly different agendas, right? So which is the entity which is like a glue which binds all of them together towards a common objective? How does the magic work? Can you just tell us what is the magic sauce?
Not sure that it's a magic source, but I think there it's many aspects, but I can mention 3 of them. First of all, in immigration country. Israel, it's an immigration country because, Israel, it's the same age like India. I think it's 1 year between India and Israel that established 1948. And for young people that they came all around after the Second War, the Holocaust, they came to Israel very young without experience without language for more than 40 different cultures. So basically, all of them entrepreneur, they need to build themselves from crash. And then in the early 90s, there is a big group came from Russia. And the big group came without language, but with experience. So the government realized that they need to help them to grow, because they are, again, they're entrepreneur by themselves, because they left everything behind. They came to Israel, so now they need to build them again from scratch. So the government realized if they will help them to grow, then they can help for the economy. So I think that it's one aspect. The second is the army. The army, it's mandatory for young people to serve for 3 years, women and men as well, right after high school, before the college. So I think that it's one of the big glue in Israel, because all the soldiers need to use gun, need to touch and use technology. Some of them even develop a high end of technology. And since we have enemy around, I think this situation, it's similar than India. So we need to develop the high end of technology. And in this case, since we need to develop it by ourselves, so by the end of 2021, young people came out of the army with experience. They touched, all of them touched technology, some of them developed even, and they took a very serious decision in the army. So they can take easily, they can take decision, they can take a risk also. And we can see today many technology that they came from the defense sector to other sectors. So I think it's very common in Israel, since we are very strong in technology. So technology moved from one discipline to many others discipline. Like we can see technology that came from the defense, we can see today in agriculture, in health, even in a fashion sector. So I think that's part of the source, and of course culture. That help us to, we call it sometimes Israeli chutzpah. Israeli chutzpah, it's that it's a little bit rude, but easily you can speak to everyone, you can say whatever you think, and you can, so it's easy to say exactly what do you think, exactly what do you want to achieve, so that it's make the way shorter and very clear. And also, I think, straight to the point. It's helped to people be straight to the point, and exactly what I need to do tomorrow morning, and not to speak generally or, in the big picture. Be very specific. What should I do tomorrow morning? 1, 2, 3. So I think that it's make I'm not sure it's a secret, but I think that it's make Israeli very innovative and, again, entrepreneurship.
No, thank you very much, Vered. I think, you are right. It's not a secret because lots have been written on this model, but it's a very difficult thing to replicate for many countries, right? The way you make it sound very easy, I think it is not that easy to make all the different parts of the ecosystem work. But thank you for sharing those. I wrote a report, very much earlier on, talking about what magic will happen if India's Jugaad and Israel's Utzpah combined together, right?
Nice.
So that was my first report, which I had done on India-Israel collaboration. But thank you for your insight. So, Ismail, coming to you before I ask you the main question, but do you have any such insights for us in terms of the UK model? How does the UK model work, and any particular insight you'd like to share from us?
Well, I think the UK model is going through a change as it tries to reposition itself post-Brexit, and that, of course, there was a lot of thought in terms of what might happen in terms of the the movement of funds, the movement of skills. And although there's been a little bit of movement and some people moved their headquarters and innovation centers away from the UK, largely the reasons why the UK was so interesting to organizations, for example, the financial services industry, the world's still a lot of the world's innovation comes out of the UK. The retail industry, a lot of the innovation comes out of the UK because it has some of the incumbent strengths around talent, around networks, around brand, around headquarters based there. And a lot of those things, I think, stay. Having said that, I think as we look forward, what you're beginning to see is new networks being established as the UK sort of repositions itself for the role that it will play in some of the industries.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Ismail. So my question to you now is that, you did this great research on the innovation which you were, talking about earlier. I want to take this further beyond innovation, when innovation leads to growth, right? So that is my question to you. How does innovation lead to growth? And are there some lessons for our MSMEs who are planning their next growth strategies?
Yeah, well, I think I would start with the point. There's a great quote that people are beginning to use, which is the amount of change we're going through right now, which actually is incredible, is probably the least amount of change that we're ever going to go through for the rest of our careers and the rest of our lives, because everything is moving at such a massive pace. Introduction of technology, the introduction of new ways of doing business, and so on. And in that environment, it's not as if you have innovation as an option to drive growth. You actually have innovation as a means to survive, A, and B, to be competitive in the marketplace. So I would say to everybody listening that I think we should think of innovation as a key lever to do business rather than an option to do business. And in that environment, what we found is that there's like 3 or 4 lessons that we come up with where the SME world and the large partner come together. In fact, the large organizations are sort of dependent on the SME world to innovate. And the 4 that I would say are around the generation of ideas, the use of technology, creating the right environment, and having the right culture. So let me just sort of give you a couple of examples of that. So if you think about ideas, what large organizations are finally coming to terms with is great ideas come from anywhere, and the likelihood of great ideas coming from people and organizations and partners who are not embedded within an institutional culture is probably higher. So organizations are creating ecosystems, including lots of small and medium enterprises, as part of their ecosystem, where they're looking to get ideas, where they're looking for those organizations to trigger all sorts of thinkings. And there's lots of great examples of this. You might remember the Post-it note from 3M. And the Post-it note from 3M came because one person, scientist actually in the 3M organization, suggested it, and it of course became the brilliant invention that it was. But a lot of enterprises right now are looking for, and 3M then said, we're going to use 15% of our time to think about new ideas, and they've got 23,000 patents. But the point is that a lot of large enterprises now are looking at the ecosystem to give them those ideas, not just internally. The second thing I would say that organizations are beginning to think about business models and platforms. The platform business model as becoming increasingly important, and I think we've got lots of examples, with Uber and Amazon and Microsoft and so on. But the platform business model actually only comes into its own and it drives lots of innovation if it has an ecosystem. So again, the idea of all sorts of different businesses and partners becoming part of the ecosystem to drive growth, either for themselves or for their partner companies, is really important. And actually, for this audience, I think the idea of thinking about what is your platform that is going to create an ecosystem probably becomes quite important. The third thing around the environment is quite interesting, actually, because what we found, of course, is that What large enterprises want to do is really want to create the environment of the small enterprise. They want to avoid everything being done by committee. They want to build small, diverse, interdisciplinary teams. And in fact, you'll know that organizations like Amazon have the pizza model, right? So if a team is bigger than you can feed with 2 pizzas, it's too big. Which is why the smaller enterprises again become really interesting to teach the large enterprises how that sort of operating model works in. And then the final point, which is really hard but really important in terms of what we found large enterprises need and where I think the SMB world can make a difference, is how do you create a culture of zero fear? Because you can't really be innovative without a sense of urgency and self-determination, but you can also get the best ideas from people who feel powerless. So you need to make them in a position where they feel powered to come up with great ideas, to be able to take those ideas to the next stage. And that is likely, large enterprises have found that is more likely to happen outside of the institutional culture, i.e. with the partner community, than in the institutional culture. So there's a lot of soft and hard things here that I think makes a big difference. And there's a huge role for the SMB world to play a part in helping large enterprises innovate.
No, absolutely. I think very, very pertinent points, Ismail. Thanks for sharing them. And, we in Accenture talk about the great acceleration, right? That's what's going on. And, if you look at the speed at which human behavior has changed in the last, 12 to 24 months, that's absolutely astonishing. And then the question is, well, how do you actually address the great acceleration? And you talked about ideas, and we have an abbreviation of ideas. So where I is about intelligence, right? It is intelligence, which could be from human ingenuity, or it could be artificial intelligence. D is about data. So you obviously need data about your customer, about your business. E is about experience. We are talking a lot about metaverse, for example, nowadays. So, E is about experience. A is about architecture. So business and technology architecture. And S, we should never, forget strategy, right? So for our MSME friends, this is a very simple and short abbreviation of ideas, intelligence, data, experience, architecture, and strategy. With this, Vered, I'll come to you. The concept of open innovation, when startups and big corporates work together, is very well known, and Israel's been leading that for a long time. Do you have examples from Israel where the startups are collaborating with MSMEs to bring more innovation to their business? For example, in India, Freshworks is one of the big SaaS unicorns here, and they are doing, their main segment is MSMEs only, right? They're bringing innovation to MSMEs. So are there such examples where Israeli startups are working with MSMEs also?
Since in Israel, as I mentioned, there's no market, so the startups need to regard the target market from the day one. So they need to collaborate. They need to find SME or multinational to work with, or to help them to penetrate the target market, or even to understand how to develop according to the need. So from the day one, it's not a commercial collaboration, but it's many others way to collaborate. For example, in Israel today, we have more than 360 multinationals that are active in Israel. In order to allocate the very early stage startups to help them to understand what should be on the target market. So instead of to take the early stage startups to the target market to continue to develop, the multinational come to Israel. So that it's unique. We can see, merge and acquisition everywhere for a small startups, but what is unique in Israel that the multinational decides to open like an open innovation, open center, innovation center, or others models. There's many models in Israel for innovation center, let's say, R&D center and others. So instead of to open it on the on the market. They're coming to Israel. They open the center in Israel, and they bring the startups in the place that they know very well. So they help them to grow in the environment that they're used to, and help them to develop according to the need. And once they're mature or ready to the market, then they can go aboard. So I think that it's unique, and it's a very good example for collaboration that it's required, and there's no other options. And I would like to add one point for your last question about how to deal with innovation in SME or in a big corporate. So I think for my takeaway for our audience, it's to have an SME, to have champion for innovation inside the company. And I fully agree with you and with Ismail that you need a group inside the multinational, the SME, and outside, and allow for many people inside, doesn't matter what is the position, to come up with new idea, different idea, to share with the champion, but with involvement of the management. And I think that will help them to start to deal with innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that, Vered. I totally agree with you and your views on that. So my question now to you, Ismail, is that, nowadays, and, I'm sure this is a big thing in UK as well. There's a lot of focus on, sustainability by businesses of all size, right? It has become in fact, in Accenture, we say sustainability is the new digital. It is around that same, inflection point. So do you think that presents an opportunity for MSMEs to come up with, compelling solutions in areas, for example, like sustainable value chains or climate tech? So do you think that, sustainability could be a big growth segment for MSMEs going ahead?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think it's a huge opportunity because the competing field is so bare, and everybody is starting from the same position. If we look at some of the data, climate tech has seen 47 unicorns since 2015. 47 unicorns, with 28 joining in 2021, and collectively, we're looking at this market. They've raised $50 billion. At $130 billion valuation. So it's a massive market. If you look at some of the examples of organizations that started small, started recently, obviously, let me give you 3 or 4 examples. So Northvolt is a great example from Stockholm in Sweden. They were founded in 2016. In the 5 years that they've been going, they've got 1,400 employees. And they're a manufacturer of sustainable lithium-ion batteries. So, and what they do is they manufacture these products by recovering and recycling used up batteries. So, very simple business model, already funding of $6 billion in Sweden. Then there's this company called Pachama, against San Francisco. They've had a Series A of about $24 million. And they're a clean tech company, which offers a marketplace. So again, we're sort of delving into the platform economy here, where organizations can purchase carbon credits. And then they employ AI and machine learning to identify and verify forest projects for carbon offsetting. And then today already more than 1,000 companies currently purchase from that marketplace. So, they've been going for 3 years and they've already got 1,000 people in their ecosystem using the marketplace. Proterra is a great example I think people should look at again. 2004, they've been going for a little while. They had a pre-IPO equity of about $1.1 billion. And they develop electric-powered vehicles for bus fleet operators. So they got into the transport industry. They brought together the need for climate tech into that industry, and they've already their vehicles have already driven over 20 million miles in North America. So that you could see them as fairly sustainable already. And then finally, I'll give you an example of another new one. 2015, Louisiana. They've had a Series B rounding of $75 million. And that is a startup that's created an AI-powered robotic system that can recycle waste. and they've got this technology that can reportedly identify recyclable materials with a very high accuracy of over 99%. And actually, that company made itself to the CNBC distributor list, disruptor list, actually. So one of the companies that's getting a lot of attention. But generally, I would say this is a marketplace which is rich in opportunity. Of course, as you say, it is the next digital, if you like, in terms of disruption, but also a huge opportunities for organizations of all tenure and all sizes to play a big part in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as the MSMEs, themselves adopt sustainable, business models, they need to probably also look at it as a big growth opportunity for themselves. For example, I was talking about Clean India Ventures, one of the MSMEs in India is doing some, great work in this space. So as we all, I think agree that sustainability could be a very, very attractive segment for MSMEs in terms of both innovation and then how does that lead to growth. So I think, this has been a fascinating, exchange of ideas. Any last points from you, Vered, starting with you? Any one or two insights you want to give to our MSME friends?
Hard work, hard work, that is the first. It's not about talent. It's not about know-how. I think it's a combination between, between entrepreneurship and innovation, that if you have an idea and a dream, go with that all the way. And money will come, funding will come, investment will come, but hard work should be there.
Absolutely. And I think, if you have a great idea, there is no dearth of money, in India or, in some other innovative countries as well. So I totally agree with you. And then there is no substitute of hard work. So absolutely right with it. Ismail, any last minute,
Yeah, a couple of things. I love that. I love that hard work one, because there isn't anything to replace that. I love that. But I would have a couple of other things. One is be very focused on the customer and work backwards from there. And secondly, think about learning agility. So you might need to unlearn to relearn, even if you're only 2 years old, because the world is changing at such a pace that agility, I think, is going to be a key differentiator.
Absolutely. I think the mindset agility, the business model agility, technology agility as well. These are key things which you need to keep in mind. I think, I'll just like to summarize by saying that we have discussed a lot of points, and, I think the MSMEs would probably get a lot of, excellent insights out of that. I do appreciate that MSME, is a different animal, right? It's not exactly like a startup, nor is it exactly like a corporate. And I totally understand that, because actually, when I was doing my MBA in London, my first project or my thesis was actually on the British MSMEs, and that's where I realized that it is very important that they should not be clubbed in in different kind of umbrellas. They have their own entity. But I think what is happening in today's world is that a lot of these boundaries are getting meshed up, and a number of these best actions or best practices which you heard today from our two experts around innovation, around entrepreneurship, around taking risk, around experimentation, are very, very relevant for MSMEs. So my humble request to our audience would be that while you would probably have heard a lot of ideas and examples from maybe startups or maybe big enterprises, you should definitely look at the practices which are relevant to MSMEs, because it is not the same world which we were living in earlier. So I genuinely hope you got a lot of insight. I certainly did, from my two panelists who were very, very kind to share their excellent insights. So with this, I wish you all the best, and I would hand this back to the NASSCOM team. Thank you very much, Vered. Thank you, Ismail.
Thank you. Pleasure.